to welcome today's audience to today's webinar. My name is Daniel De Freitas. I will be moderating today's session, and I'm from a company called PeopleWise. We have three first-class panelists on our webinar today. Unfortunately, Jennifer has been unable to join us today. Hopefully, she'll join a future webinar. So on that note, I'm going to hand you over to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Okay, good morning. It's nice to spend this next hour with all of you, reflecting on this very important topic. My name is Jonathan Mutige. I am speaking from Johannesburg. I work with a company called Alex Forbes, formerly known as Alexander Forbes. We've just gone through our rebranding exercise. We play in the space of employee benefits, wealth management, and so forth. And we have quite a large clientele, both in South Africa and across the continent. I've been around the human capital space for a while, covering multiple sectors from oil, FMCG, and financial services. And besides being a human capital professional, I've been into business roles, in my journey so far, and good to spend time with you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Philip.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Philip Sakwa. I was actually giving Pi the opportunity to go in between. So my name is Philip Sakwa. I'm the group head of HR for C Squared. I sit in Nairobi, but I manage the African operations. We are a pan-African organization that is geared towards bringing you super speed broadband by laying the infrastructure, and we open it up to leasing, to MNOs and SPA. Interestingly, I've been in this sector for maybe around 15 years. I've done banking, transport, media, and I've become a tech by default. I am an HR profession, but I talk tech nowadays. So that is a very interesting topic that I'm also interested in when new webinars are coming through. Talent acquisition is very near to my heart because it's something that is a daily topic within the organization, but also on a bigger scale from all the peers that I interact with. So I'm excited to get in a view from my fellow panelists, but also from you, the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you and welcome. And last but definitely not least, Pi.
Good morning, everyone, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. My name is Pi Gamde. I'm the Chief Talent Officer for Coronation X. We are a financial services platform, and we operate across the entire financial services value chain, so banking, private banking, wealth management, insurance, fiduciary services. We also have a private equity, venture capital business, and a number of other businesses within our ecosystem. So I have responsibility for the talent agenda, for the group. I have over 22 years experience cutting across conglomerates, financial services, entertainment, insurance, and a few other things. I consider myself a transformation catalyst. I've done a lot of transformation work in HR, but I've also covered various enterprise-wide functions such as compliance, governance, and the whole gamut. So look forward to enjoying the session with you, with my fellow panelists, and also with the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all three of you for being with us today. And really, we have a wealth of knowledge across some different industries, which is really going to help have quite a rich conversation on the topic. So our topic that we're going to be discussing today is attracting specialized talent. How can African employers attract and retain specialized, highly skilled African professionals? So quite a big topic, and a lot of different factors that feed into this topic. What I'm going to do is ask the audience, welcome. I can see people already typing in the chat. You can start popping in some of your questions around the topic, or if there are questions to specific panelists that you have, please do start putting them in the chat now, and we will come to them later. We'll try and pick out a few that we can get to today. So in kicking off the conversation, I'm going to hand over to each of the panelists to do an overview on their general thoughts on our topic today. Jonathan, if we start off with you.
Thank you, Dan. I think my broad views on this subject, one is it is a highly important subject for us to engage in, actually just for the sake of the continent's prosperity and progression. I think the continent needs to be able to retain a lot of the specialized, highly skilled talent across multiple disciplines. If we are to, progress as a continent. So from that perspective, I think it's absolutely important. Second, view on this is that I have found over the years that a lot of organizations, when it comes to what you will categorize as highly specialized skills, a lot of organizations battle to keep these skills, partly because in a lot of cases, the operating model has never been clear about why they really need these levels of specialization. So you tend to find organizations have specialized skills that are just passing through, or once they get them, actually because they haven't thought through it from an operating model perspective, you end up not retaining them. I also don't think that, other than the ones who end up in consulting firms, I'm not too sure that highly specialized talent is sufficiently celebrated and positioned as key. So I think these are some of the things that we have to think through very deeply. If we are to retain, and I'm focusing a lot more on the specialized, right? Not just highly skilled, but specialized, because I think that's where our biggest gap is.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
So let me share my thoughts on it. I think primarily for me, and I would lean on some of the comments from Jonathan also, is attracting them means we have to build ourselves as opposed to looking outside for someone else to build. So we have to, the investment has to, we have to continue to double up on our investments in building those specialized talents, mainly because also Africa, there's a brain drain going on. A lot of them are being exported. And so if we don't continue and sort of keep it a revolving door, the revolving door concept, we could just, empty out. So one is we have to take full ownership of developing them ourselves, right? My other thought on it is we have to lose some of the, systems and structures that stifle or could stifle these, the talents, because it's specialized. It's not, you can't go and just pick it off, or, anywhere. So we have to think about what types of contracts and employment arrangements and agreements we have with them. We have to create some fluidity around it without distorting the fundamentals, governance issues around those things, and ensuring that there are no employment issues, that come up, with those types of structures. So those will be my two main thoughts around the topic.
Thank you, Pi. Thank you. Philip.
Yeah, I think just also picking some lines from both of my panel members, but mine will be more really targeting or maybe specific to the environment that I work in, which is high tech. And as we know, high tech really everything moves very, very, very fast. So as organizations, how proactive are we not to be caught off guard? And one of the things that I think what we need to do, like Pi said, is to develop either within or with not necessarily in the company that we work in, but in the countries or continent, for example, for Africa. I think as organizations, we also need to step outside our comfort zones and engage the stakeholders like universities, institutes of education. Because what I have noticed, especially in Africa, I mean, here in Africa, is that universities have become very commercial. They do courses that not necessarily for the students to come out and get, and hit the job market, but because that course at that particular point in time is very, very lucrative and is, bringing in the money. So if we sit down on a round table with these guys and focus them and say, this is the tomorrow, I mean, most especially for the high tech, because the environment is changing, and we see how we can work together and empower these kids that are coming out. I think that would be something that overall for me, that is my thinking.
Thank you, Philip. So really great differentiation of views here in building the different aspects, whether it's, I think, some of what Pi said, that focus instead of the build, buy, borrow, really focusing on that build, but also trying to remove some of those processes that are making things a little bit less easy to maybe keep or attract that specialized talent. And also looking at the universities and the education space, Philip. So good, thank you. So we're going to kick off with our first official question on the topic. And the question is, what challenges are you currently facing in your industry, in your organization, in recruiting African talent? Let's go to Pi first for a change.
Well, thank you. So as I thought about the topic and I looked, internally, I think this is a topic that enables or requires us to be truly vulnerable about, our realities on ground. I've realized that there probably are about, four main things that, challenges that we've experienced. And one of them is the availability of the talent themselves, right? It's, can you find them? Where are they? That's number one. And whereas, maybe time passed, we could find these talents within 2 weeks, you've interviewed and you're getting ready to onboard a candidate. Now, 2 months, 3 months, because the pool has just completely shrunk. The second issue is around the proficiency levels of, the talent. So it's because there's been a brain drain, we have fewer, pool, and those coming or are in the process of coming up may not have sufficient skills that you're looking for. Another challenge is around the expectations of the candidates. When you think about the whole conversations around the Great Resignation and the great, all the great negotiations, it's really, the highest bidder who can pay me more, right? And I know that whether I have the skills or not, companies are back against the wall, and so they are willing to make these compromises, pay a lot more for perhaps basic skills, than they would pay in the previous dispensation. So I'll just stop. I'll just stop here. I think one last element is for traditional organizations, and the financial services is one of those real traditional organizations. The structures that have sustained the financial services and industries like that are not particularly attractive to this generation. So, how do you bring them? How do you bring them in?
Some interesting points there, Pi. Thank you.
Um,
Philip.
Yeah, let me just actually go into quickly because Pat mentioned something that is something that so we're experiencing in the field of high tech, and that is availability. But for me, it is more or less I call it recycling of talent, because the fact that we have reached a point where we've tapped and tapped the specialized environment, we have actually started recycling them. And when you start recycling, then comes in the affordability, because organizations now just package things because they want to get a Pi, they want to get a Jonathan of today, and you find that sometimes it's actually unrealistic in terms of what you buying outside that. Then the other thing, of course, I've noted is in my field is that we've actually started competing with the West, whereby you train, you do your stuff here in Africa, and yet because of globalization, because of the talent that we have in Africa, these guys are poached by the West, and they're given, the packages they even get, let's say, coming to London, for example, Daniel, is not that high, but they're very attractive to them, and so they jump the ship very, very quickly. And again, on the third point that I'm experiencing in my environment is what I call the millennial syndrome, because for them, they're constantly on the move. You come, you recruit, someone is really, really a superstar, but within a year or even less than a year, they will tell you, I'm sorry, I need more, or I want to leave. So I think for me, basically, those are the three areas that are patent for me right now in the high-tech environment.
Okay, thank you. I like that millennial syndrome. I've not heard of that before. We need to trademark that, Philip. Jonathan.
Yeah, well, as Philip was talking, I was wondering where some of us fit in this category. So, but I must agree with both Pi and Philip. In my view and the experience we are having, and especially in South Africa, where part of the big agenda we are having to drive is redressing the previous impact of the policies that the country pursued, and with discrimination and so forth. We have a bigger agenda to transform how the talent market looks. And because the market has not traditionally provided a balanced, diverse talent pool, it's actually proving to be very, very, very difficult to find the people that we are looking for. And this is broad, right? Across the various levels. When it gets to specialized skills, and we as a company and our sector, we rely heavily on skills like actuarial, qualification. And if you just look at that pond, you have got no more than 31,000 globally. South Africa is about 1,000 of these practicing and 2,000 studying, right? So, and everyone wants them. So it's a very, very tight. It's a very tight market. That we are fishing from, and the reality, like any other skill set that's rare, is that talent commands the decision, and they actually are in charge of the conversation more than we want to admit, right? So and I think Pi made a very interesting point. It's becoming a very common experience that you go through a courtship right up to the end, sometimes up to 3 days before the person joins, and then they tell you, sorry, got something else. And you listen to the decision process they've gone through, and you think, but hang on, we could have done this, but the point is, these highly specialized skills where the pool is very limited, they are driving the conversation, they are driving how the decisions are made. And so I think part of the challenge we have as professionals and organizations actually is how, can we find a different way of being able to understand what they are looking for and be more responsive to their needs to improve our ability to keep them, not just our companies, but to keep them within the continent. And so, our ability to begin to think out of the box in terms of the benefits that we offer, and how we respond to some of their nuanced needs, in my mind, is beginning to be a very big issue we need to figure out. And the final comment I would make, you used to think that, even lower down, in the organization at the entry levels, when people are, entering the industry and growing, that actually it should be relatively easy. But my sense in the last 2 years is you're starting to see strain, across all levels. And the one thing that I think is beginning to be a big watch out is just the levels of experience that people can, bring as you're competing more globally. You need a lot more experience and seasoned people in their roles. And that's also beginning to be a noise space, in my view.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks to all the speakers. It's very interesting, your views on this, because there are so many aspects that you've mentioned: the shrinking pool of talent, the recycling of talent, millennial syndrome, the great resignation. There's all of these aspects to think about. And Jonathan, actually, you sort of wrapped it up quite succinctly, that it's almost the business adapting in every shape or form to meet new people, the needs of new talent coming in, when that was very different not too long ago, where people would come, say what they're looking for, and then they would need to sort of adapt to fit into the business. So we are seeing quite a shift. And I think that leads me on to the second question, because this some people argue that this is the reason it's shifted. So the question is, what impact has the pandemic had on how you're recruiting talent?
Can I start?
Sure, Philip, over to you.
I think for me, it's so funny because even before the pandemic, we had this work-life balance where we can work from anywhere. I'm actually right now I sit in Nairobi, but at the moment I'm working from a different country at the moment. So we had that flexibility. But now, when you go and start recruiting or looking for specialized talent, they're defining their location, they're defining their time, they're defining, because what the pandemic has given us in a way is that someone can work from anywhere and they can perform. But that's a question mark, though, with a question mark, because we have seen that people have been burnt out to using Zoom and all that. So people have had this in their head, embedded in their head. Okay, yeah, the pandemic has shown the world that I can work from anywhere. So when you're really negotiating or trying to bring someone, say for example, to be based in any country or in any city, they'll start reasoning with you how the pandemic has changed this, the pandemic has changed that. So the issue and the problem, I'm also, maybe a question I will start giving to my panelists, is that how do you balance the working environment that you previously had before COVID to the new requirements of the specialized, resource? Because at the end of the day, you will actually need this person to be in country. I'll give you an example. At the moment, I'm recruiting for a country director, a country CEO, who is supposed to be, it's an MD of a country. And I'm involved in these discussions that, can I work in Paris for 3 weeks in a month? Or, I'm like, honestly. So you really are starting to think, are these people serious? I am recruiting you as an MD of a company. How are you telling me you can work from Paris? Yes, you can, but you need it to be in country. So I think for me, that the pandemic in a way has opened up a Pandora's box in terms of what are my rights of working from where I want to be. So that is the only, that for me, I'm looking at that and I want to hear some ideas, but that is a challenge and that I've seen. Although there's positive aspects of that, but that is a challenge, and I'm really facing right on this.
Pi, Jonathan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead, Pi.
Okay, thank you. So when we talk about some of the impact the pandemic has had, and I think Philip has talked about some of them, but as I look in and from conversations even with colleagues and just understanding what they are dealing with, I think there is a rediscovery of the individual, that in itself is the awareness. Talent has agency now. They have so many choices and options, and so if you don't want to meet my expectations, well, thank you, bye. So that's one of the, whilst it's a good thing, that self-discovery for the human being or the individual, but it's to what extent and where are the boundaries, and and things like that. The second impact that I would talk about is that, so at organizational levels, is that you almost, every day you have to keep on. So the question of agility is now ever more so important. How, you have to continue to think nimble and agile and just be flexible, where you had policies and processes and things that were almost sort of rooted in the ground with roots like, the baobab trees. Now you can't. You almost are. It's sort of like architecture where you build, upon the ground, and you have to keep on renovating. You have to keep breaking down from this and breaking down and chipping away and remodeling and things like that. So that's something. That's one of the things that I think about. Expanded capabilities. So today you're looking for, maybe you're looking for an actuary, but as Jonathan has talked about, the fact that there are very few in the world, and then when you come down to Africa, it's even, it's even much less. You can't find them. So what do? Do you build your own program? Do you lower the entry barrier, barrier to entry, just so that you can bring in semi-qualified, and then you train them as you go along. I think the last thing also I'll talk about with regards to the impact is, as opposed to looking outside all the time, can we look inwards? When I look at, organizations, you have your extreme outliers to the right, to the left. What typically happens with your average Joe, the people we have in the middle? That's where the greatest potential in our organization sits, but it's the least place where we place any type of effort, concerted efforts. We're not deliberate with those we call the average Joes, those who are in that middle belt. Can we go in there and look for the potential in these guys and train them? So I think I'll leave that. But what one of the impacts is that organizations are starting to look in that pool now and saying, what can I do? I can't just put all my eggs in the basket of, my superstar performers, because they're the, the risk factor is high. So I'll stop there.
Great point, Pi. It's almost like, because people were focusing on those hypos and those superstars before, and sort of that middle band was being neglected, potentially from the pandemic now, actually that middle band is saying, wait a second, where do we fit in? And they're starting to jump ship. And now we're having to do this dance as businesses to say, oh, wow, okay, now we've got a bigger problem, because it's not just the hypos that are leaving. It's those people who were our steady goers that were keeping the ship afloat. Thanks, Pi. Jonathan?
Yeah, the few things I would add here is, I think there is a reality that a lot of us as leaders, we are taking too long to accept. And that is that there is a world called borderless talent world that the pandemic ushered in. And I think, many CEOs and many leaders, we are not wrapping our heads around that there is that world now that we live in. And, and I think, it's something that those companies that are going to wake up to this and embrace it are going to emerge winners. I've found it very interesting, and at least in our market in South Africa, a number of companies have gone out and said, we are going back. And what I have found in parallel to this conversation is, when I reach out to people and I say, well, we are not going back, we're maintaining hybrid. And by the way, you can work anywhere you choose. People say, well, then I'll rather talk to you. So I think, this is for me, what the pandemic has really done is shifted majorly the way people think about things, and we have to embrace it. The other gift, by the way, that I'm finding that has come with the post-pandemic or era is that access to talent is actually now much better, because I don't have to work on coordinating travels for most people. I can now talk to so many people at any time from anywhere. Just as a light moment, when you do have chats with these great talented people, just remove the background of your company in case their boss walks in, right? And it's happened to me not too long ago, but the bottom line is, it's so much easier now to access people at any time, and you can pack in a lot more conversations, make decisions even faster without the constraint of physical presence, and that's awesome.
So not just negative impacts, but also positive impacts, Jonathan, that you're seeing in the space. And again, almost talking to some of those things Pi was mentioning, the processes, the structures. Our time to hire used to be maybe a month, and now actually it needs to be a week, 2 weeks, because people are getting other offers, they're seeing other opportunities. I think that leads quite nicely into the next question. And I think, Jonathan, you've kicked it off in terms of really taking advantage of the borderless talent. And this question is really talking to what is your organization doing in this space to tackle some of the challenges we've mentioned around the brain drain, around the great resignation, around just millennial syndrome, Philip. So, Jonathan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, and I think I made the point. I mean, what some of the things that we have at least done is we have gone to our people with a revised policy and said, you can work anywhere. You can relocate and work anywhere, and you just need to make sure that, everything works. And when you are required physically, that you can do it. A few of our people have taken that opportunity, and they are loving it. When people move, some to coastal areas and some back to where they were born, and they can work there, right? As long as the connectivity works. But bottom line is the level of support you can give behind a strategy like that I think, makes a difference. So that's one. And we've had people now move abroad who are supporting us from abroad, which is fine and perfect. But the more important things for me are a need for us to revisit our talent strategy. And that's certainly a piece of work we have been doing, where we are now putting specialized and rare skills at the center of our talent framework, to the extent that I now have discussions with the board about who these people are, where are we taking their RAM, what's our value proposition to them, because I think it's a conversation that you have to escalate to your exco and your board, so you can start talking about this as a strategic issue. So that's certainly some of the things that we are starting to do. Is it enough? I think it's just the beginning. I think we can do a lot more. And the bigger issue in my mind is, I still don't think that the value proposition for specialists in general industries, other than in consulting, I still don't think we've got this right. I don't think we've got this right. And this is definitely a big piece of work that we are busy doing, and hopefully we can also get to advise some of our clients when we figure out the answer. But just putting them centrally in your strategies and getting your board talking about them, in my mind, has already changed and step changed the dialogue on how we're thinking about it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Philip?
Yeah, I think one of the things that actually Jonathan touched on that we in our space have tried to focus on more is we call it opening borders. This means that you can work from anywhere, and we as an organization have taken steps to ensure that whenever we enter country, one of the things we tell the regulators there that our business is supported from any country that we come from. We operate. So I would not necessarily need to have someone seated in this country who is from this nation, but I'll be, sending through talent from whichever country that we have. So what that has happened is that it has also given the middle, the 70% of our performers, the what Pi looked at, mentioned, those the people that we have normally not really looked at, to open up and say, volunteering, I'm going to go for that. Can I spend 2 weeks in this country or in this region, for example? And that actually is a new thing that is working out well. But the other thing, the biggest thing that I think we HR people fall short on, we do these very, elaborate, very picturesque talent management plans, but we never put them we plan them, but we never implement for one reason or the other. So I think one of the things that we are now going back to do is looking at how do we do our talent planning and succession planning. Are we able to actually be, behind the scenes and put them in the forefront and make it happen? And intentional succession planning that is going to be seen by others. That is helping out, bringing out those shy people that are in the background that you've actually not seen. So let's not talk the talk. Let's not just talk. Let's talk and walk the walk. Yeah. And what I say, what Jonathan has mentioned, is that when I when I first put this to my exco, and I said, that succession planning and needs a bit of money. Please open up some of that budget for me. They were like, okay, why? So when I started mentioning things that, that it would be and it would do, they've actually bought it in. So I'm getting budget specifically for me to implement succession planning properly, rather than just putting it up there that we have it. And then the other thing is also, I mentioned before that we have been very aloof in terms of engaging our stakeholders, and we think external stakeholders, and we think we can just go there and pull talent. I think now the round table discussion with universities, people where they come from, this is also something that we have and we have started looking at. We've done it in a way of a CSR program where now I am really focusing, for example, in one of the countries to recruit female engineers, and there I don't have. So what I have is a few engineers that I have. I'm sending them to universities to talk to people, to talk to these young people coming through, even college, before they go to university, and say, you can be a female engineer and you can make it. So that is something that I believe. What happens is that if you bring a fresh graduate into the organization, you train, for sure they at least will give you 2 years. And within the 2 years, you've achieved something, So that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Philip. Pi, final thoughts on that question?
So my final thoughts on the question, I'll speak on 2 key things. One is engagement. We, as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking through everything. I used to say, I can pay you my CEO's salary and you still will not be satisfied. Still want more. So I want to move the conversation beyond money and really talk about engagement. So we look at employee engagement as in the activities, the TGIFs, the hangouts, the football match, and all of those. Those are just activities. At the heart of engagement is really conversations. And what is lacking in many of the spaces is the conversations. We had we had a staff, very good, employee in his field, and he wanted to leave. But because the line manager, there was a lot of conversations and engagements with the line manager, and an understanding of his needs, he was moved into another function, and and he's starting to settle down. So sometimes I think it's that lack of real engagement. A lot of the conversations and how organizations run is very transactional. Line leadership is not trained to actually engage with their staff. A lot of it is left for HR, but HR doesn't have line of sight and cannot possibly engage a workforce of 1,000 or 2,000. That is the responsibility of line leadership. So how do we, this specialized skills we are bringing into the organization or building, are we engaging them to the point where we know how long they will stay with us? We know what will be the trigger point for them to leave. I'll leave the conversation there. My second point on it is really around the succession management. Whereas you could have a succession management plan that spanned up to 10, 15 years, 30 years, you knew who is next in line and who is next in line. Unfortunately, whether or not we like it in today's world, that is not possible. Again, we have to think a revolving door approach. So like Philip talked about, going to the universities and things like that, we have a graduate training program where we bring them in. If they give me 2 years, that's a job well done for this generation. I'll take the 2 years, right? And so we have to rethink and constantly continue to just tweak on, when the world is going to continue to move, and even at a much faster rate. So we have to be we have to be sensitive to those things. And the last point I'll make is really the need for HR itself to understand the business, to build business, their business skills, become business savvy, and understand how they can truly support, the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Pi. So some key points there, really around borderless talent, getting talent on the EXCO agenda, especially succession, but also engagement beyond just money, thinking of other ways to have those conversations and really make those connections with people that are joining the business, but also people who are currently in the business. So that leads us on to the skills or the roles. What, in your view, are the skills and roles that you're particularly struggling to recruit for? And why do you think that is?
I mean, I guess I spoke a bit about my particular sector, right? Those sort of skills, your, qualified financial planners, again, they are in such, short supply around the world. You would have thought, planners and financial planners would be plenty, but, across the world, you've got, about 160, 180,000 of these individuals with the right qualifications. So if you just, think about those numbers and you think about the size of the population and what you require, we just don't have enough, and I think some of these, data points, and we probably should pay more attention to the real skills availability data sets and use that to help us think about strategically, continentally, as corporations, how much more can we invest to turn this around? It is just not the sort of data that we are looking at, sufficiently. Tomorrow is going to be something different. We're battling with finding cybersecurity type skills, but I can tell you now, 5 years ago, the writing was on the wall, right? That these skills might be in short supply. So So the point I'm actually going down here is it's one thing for us to worry about these skills today. It's something else for us to start figuring out which new skills are we likely to be in short supply of tomorrow, and can we get ahead of the curve, on those skills. And I think it's a rapidly moving landscape that at a different level, and I know we've all used the word succession planning, is going to challenge even the need for that word to exist in our lexicon, right? Because these things are going to move at such a rapid pace. So for me, we've got the immediate challenge, but where I'm starting to worry a lot more is, can I start anticipating the next wave? And what, can I do something about it, now? And that's where my biggest challenge is.
It's not just immediate, those future critical capabilities that are going to set the business up for the future, not just today.
Correct. And I think that's why, and I like Pi's use of the word conversation, right? We are not having enough conversations with our people across the organization to be able to read and anticipate, some of this. We've got such a reservoir of intelligence and skills in our organizations that we don't tap into to be able to, to get new insights on where we could go. And I think the next generation that's going to run this corporation has got to have a bigger voice now.
Food for thought. Thanks, Jonathan.
So I can just speak about some of the, maybe just one of the situations we had. So we have a graduate academy, and we have different streams, targeting different specialized skills and competencies that we look to have. And one of the ones we were at a point trying to, put together was a data scientist and data analysts stream. We stripped down the data scientist stream just because the fundamentals weren't even, quite there, right, in order to build that. And we thought, okay, focus on the data analytics. And, as Jonathan used the word, you have to, you're thinking ahead. So we're still thinking about how do we build our own capabilities around, data scientists, because whether we like it or not, we are going to continue to need these skills, as we go into the future. Other skills, Jonathan talked about actuaries. We have an insurance portfolio within our business. And we had gone through just trying to find, the skills within the actuarial space. And so we've had to put together our own program targeting, that program, and also build a different type of compensation incentive structure to encourage the young ones to go into, to specialize as actuaries. And then some of the other areas where, private equity type capabilities, and where you find them, of course, the expectations sometimes can tip over. So those are some of the areas that we are seeing this. But what are we doing is understanding how can we again grow organically, and just think about, if I invest in these young ones, by the time they give me 2 years, I already have another pool coming behind that they can train. And sort of, I just love the revolving door concept. And Jonathan talks about changing the lexicon, and that's why I say succession management, because it's really around managing the broad, value chain across everything you're doing to whether it's get people, keep them, and understand they don't want to stay, so why do we want to keep people who don't want to stay? Let them stay as long as they want to stay, and you build your business around how long they can give you. And I think that would take a lot of the headache off of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pi. Philip.
I think my field is a weird one because you can wake up tomorrow and everything has changed totally, and then you start running out up and down like a yo-yo. In the tech world, we use a lot of software engineers at the moment, and there's so many software engineers, but we are also looking for those very, very specific software engineers with, let's say, who have been there and tested. And so I'm talking about Internet of Things, people that can give me that. And we're talking about cyber security. I think Jonathan talked about it. In Africa, we are unfortunately struggling to get those top talent. It is there at the 70%. I'm doing it all, but that specific talent that has been there and has been tested and been certified by all the the cloud providers, the Googles of today, the Amazon. So when you go outside in this market and say, I am looking for an AI, certified 5+ years in this market, believe me not, you'll struggle. So, and that for me, looking at that as a challenge, where do we go? This is something that a conversation that is started maybe like 2-3 years ago or 4 years ago, and people are saying the world tomorrow will be Internet of Things or AI, and people were like, okay, yeah, we'll start promoting that as something in the inside, but we were not at that speed. So what I'm actually looking at as well is adapting what Pai is saying, the open door policy, or the revolving door policy, because the talent is there, but how do you utilize it to make sure that it gives you that, but also when you need it tomorrow, is it going to be available? I find myself running to my mother company, which is Google, to get that talent to borrow, because in Africa it's not there. So again, everything here for me is entangled. Are we developing ourselves internally enough? Are we utilizing the stakeholders enough? But also, I think in most organizations, we are a bit slow to turn around, especially in the tech world, and move with we are moving. The world is moving with.
A lot of agility happening. Thank you, Philip. So before I ask the final question, what I'd like to do is just ask the audience to start popping their questions into the chat, because after this question, we're going to move on to some of your questions that you have for our panelists. So a final question I have for the panelists today is really around, it is something you've been speaking about, but it's a term that came up before the pandemic, before remote working became a thing. So we've heard in the industry, the gig economy that we've heard rising. So is the gig economy a solution to attracting specialized talent? When we see a rise in things like nomad visas, we know we've spoken about borderless talent, but we've spoken quite a bit on this call about the build and buy. But is there that opportunity for that borrow, even if it's just for a short period of time? And what is short today? Because some of you have said 2 years from an employee is, decent. So is that enough to plug someone from the gig economy?
The answer, in my view, okay, go ahead, Philip.
I'll say for me, in the environment we work in, yes, it is. 2 years is good enough. And why am I saying that? When you hear something like that, I always tell my people that, when you enter my organization, always look for the exit, meaning that, that is exit, but that not literally meaning how much you equip yourself to get out of here with the skills, is because our environment changes so quickly that within the next 2 years, what I'm doing tomorrow might not even be necessarily what we'll be focusing on. For example, right now in our organization, we're trying to focus on cloud and cloud security. But with this environment, is that what we're going to be focusing on in the next 2 years? Probably not, or maybe probably yes, but it will be a different thing altogether, mangled up and built in all these things. So when I have someone who's going to give me dedicated 2 years, I believe that that is good enough. But I'm not saying that they should just come and stay here for 2 years. No. Some of them, I actually tie them down, at least give me 4 years. 4 years is good enough. But I believe that is doable in my environment, but not necessarily in the biggest broader things.
Thank you, Philip. Any other comments on Pi?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, the question on the gig economy is just an absolute yes. But the transition has to be well managed and very swift. We don't have the luxury of time. Can you put a time frame to, whether you can bring people for short term? And I don't think it's even possible, Daniel. I think the smart thing we are now having to learn is beginning to understand from a productivity perspective, what work do you need to be done and who can do it? Because increasingly, some of these specialist talents are no longer interested in wearing my shirt with my logo. They want to come in, do a piece of work and do the same piece of work for Pi, in the evening, do a piece of work for Philip the next morning, and they'll still deliver what I need. We have to wrap our heads around that and start creating an environment that encourages more of that, but we have to do it in a well-managed way. But we don't have time on our side. We have to move swiftly. Otherwise, new organizations are going to emerge with that answer and just render a lot of our big, slower organizations redundant very quickly.
Thank you, Jonathan. Pi, anything to add there?
Sorry, my mic was off. Okay, so not much, but I absolutely agree with the fact that the gig economy is certainly a good thing. Are there industries that may struggle with it? Yes. Mostly the traditional, organizations who are still grappling and wanting to hold on to, how they've done it in the past. But I think the most important thing to think about is that people have, that awareness I talked about at the beginning, that I said, COVID has helped people to unravel, right? People have purpose. And how do you take my purpose, my vision, my desire for myself, and match it with the work that I do? And what the gig economy is doing is that it's providing that, where I can do what I want to do the type of work I want to do, but fulfilling purpose, but I'm still doing good work. And because also it is how the flexibility and independence that it creates around work arrangements, thereby individuals can fulfill many aspects of their life. And that's why you're seeing a flip around the conversation around work-life balance too. It's really your life. Work is only an element of it. There are so many other factors, your health, your family, and all of that. So flipping that conversation and saying, I've got a life. I want to make sure that my life, I'm living a purposeful life, and work is only one element of that purposeful life that I'm living. And so the gig economy is certainly addressing the needs of the individuals. Organizations just have to come on board now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pi. So it looks like there's definitely a space for the gig economy. It's just about organizations taking it on board to a greater or lesser degree. So thank you. We're now going to go on to one or two questions from the audience. I've got one from Jude. And Jude is asking, how are we dealing with giving experience to young, inexperienced people? So Pi, I know you mentioned some stuff around here, so I'm not going to come to you. Philip, I know you spoke about going to universities. Jonathan, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, I think I saw that question coming through, right? And the way I will answer this question is, we have to delicately understand, what experiences and insights are we trying to pass on, and again, it has to be a well-managed process. Some of the conversations I've had with individuals that we are positioning to take over some of these portfolios are well, hang on, this person is trying to get me around the loop on the things that they have done, but actually operate very differently. So it's figuring that balance. And being very clear on what is it that you need to sustain and what are the experiences that you want these individuals to pass on and make them feel valued in doing it. And let's not underestimate the amount of reorientation you need to do with people that are getting into their twilight careers, right? So that they understand how to pass on the baton and not pass on all their bad habits and, from their previous experiences. And there is an interesting, frustrating tension that the new generation is experiencing with an old model handover process.
Thank you, Jonathan. So next question, and I think this will be the final one we have time for today. The question is from Gladys. Engagement and money are great, but how do organizations keep a 35-year-old who feels like they've reached their peak for another 10 years to facilitate succession planning? Pi, should we go to you for this question?
Okay, thank you, Daniel. So I'm going to throw out a couple of things because I think this 35-year-old needs to understand that they're not bound to that organization. And again, I did talk about individuals today have agency. It's such a, it's a free economy. It's opened up. There are opportunities all over. Can you fulfill the desire to grow elsewhere? It's something that first of you have to think about as an individual, because if you think today, waiting for 10 years to get there, the entire business world would have shifted significantly, and and you wake up 10 years later and it's, oh, thank you very much, we don't need you anymore. So you also have to think about, okay, can I get there faster than 10 years without compromising on my skills, capabilities, and all of that? And that's for the individual. With regards to the organization and your expectations towards towards the individual is to continue to expand their role and in little ways. So I recall one of the roles I had done started out as a department and with several functions, but it was every few seasons they'll throw in another function to me and throw in another function and eventually we grew a department to a group function with departments within that function without changing the structure, the fundamental structure of the organization. And that way you've addressed the issue. So that's one of the things you can ask for. Can you increase my job scope? Can you give me, put me in new roles? Let me try my hands at other things and find excitement through that. And lastly, like I said, the cycle for succession management is really shrinking. It is shrinking. And if you want to wait 10 years to sit in a position, you have to think about other possibilities. Will that 10 years materialize, or do I have to have plan A, B, C, and D? And on the side, you can start to think about developing other skills and competencies for yourself and see where windows of opportunities can also open up. Thank you.
Thank you, Pi.
Sorry, can I just say one point on that?
Yes, Philip.
I think what I've also told my people is that we should stop looking at the ladder because the ladder is becoming shorter and shorter. Companies that have very flat structures, so you're not necessarily going to move up. I'm now saying people, you should start looking at the on the horizontal. Start taking the sprints. Start taking the marathon. Stretch yourself, like Pi is saying. I can, just do things that you're not necessarily going to be doing not in your department. Start now building yourself as a person rather than thinking upstairs, because upstairs is very, very small. You
know what, Dan? I think this notion of succession planning is probably a good dedicated topic on its own.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it will be worth exploring this actually, and what it means now and where the world is going.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Thank you. So I think that's all the questions we have time for today. As you'll see in the chat, if you do have any additional questions or if you have posted a question and we didn't get to it today, please drop them in the comment section of the YouTube video and we'll come back to them. So what I'd like to do is just any closing remarks. I know you've just said, Jonathan, succession's another topic, probably for another webinar. Any additional closing remarks from our panelists today before we wrap up?
So let me go first with my closing remark, and in just making that remark, I'll just address a comment I saw on the in the chat around bringing in older workers, and I think that's something we didn't touch on too much. But just to say, as we think about the specialized skills, because people are hopping a lot today, they are not. It's very surface knowledge. You're going to find there's no depth. But people who have stayed and, you know, at least to a good degree, have some depth. How can organizations leverage the skills of the older generations, perhaps engage them on, you know, part-time basis, and to help train and groom and grow individuals? So most especially in those specialized fields that we are having a lot of concerns with, and not say, oh, they're old, they're tired, they should go sit out there, but how do we you know, engage them? Because they're not, you know, what actually kills them is the lack of work and not doing anything. But if we engage them on part-time basis contracts and things like that, they do have value to bring to the table. So please, let's, you know, business leaders, let's not leave these ones out. Let's not send them home to retire, but figure out how we can still keep them as we, you know, build specialized skills within Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Pi. Philip?
I think I'm, you know, just looking at the comments on the chat, it brings me home to the thought of we as Africans, or we people who are working in Africa, what our agenda in terms of, you know, talent, specialized talent. What do we describe as specialized talent? I think we need to get to that point and say, okay, you know, guys, this is where we're starting from. But the other thing is also, when you look at this topic, it's quite broad, as you said, Daniel, in the beginning. I think we need to now go back into it and then break it down to different you know, sectors, to different fields. Because when I'm looking, you know, even sizes of organizations, because when I look at some of these comments, you know, you find that one does not fit all. But what are we saying now is that, yes, we know that, but we are addressing the issue as it is. And let's look at it and not really say we don't have a problem. We do have a problem. And that problem is you know, is created by the environments we're working in. Okay, so let's start from there. And then we'll see how we go, you know, how we do it, you know, go into all the details, the nitty-gritties. But let's start from there. Do we have talent in Africa? Yes, we do have talent. Do we have specialized talent? Yes, we do, but it is limited in all sectors of the fields that we're working in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Philip. Jonathan, final remarks.
Yeah, and I will pick up from where Philip is on the words "it's limited." The reality is our inability to invest has limited this. And the cost of this limitation, it's immense when you think about how much it costs to import those skills and how much money, you know, goes out, right? So I think there's a sense of, there's an urgency for us to do this.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. So I'd like to thank Talent Agenda. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. And thank you to each of our speakers. Thank you so much for your insights that you've shared today. Please keep your eyes peeled for the next webinar. And on that note, I see we've just got in the chat to please fill in the survey if you haven't already. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you on our next webinar. Bye.
So much, thank you, and I wish you all the best.